VCT Masters Bangkok is just around the corner. We are nearing the start of the first international tournament of the VCT 2025 season. So today we're going to be looking at all 8 teams attending this tournament and talking about their chances at winning the entire thing. There are some really interesting teams attending this tournament. I think in terms of an 8-team tournament, this is probably some of the most talent that you could get out of that amount of teams. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So this is the board we have today. We have all 8 teams from all 4 regions, and as I said, this is quite an interesting crop of teams. A lot of talent here, a lot of surprises as well, but overall, on paper, this looks like it's going to be an incredible tournament. So we will be starting with the Americas teams. As you can see, I have a lot of stats on the board for each team, so we're going to go through them all. Starting with the top seed of each region, which means G2 in the Americas is the first team we have to talk about. A team that a lot of people are putting as the favorites, and I cannot blame anyone with that opinion. This team has looked deadly in the Americas kickoff tournament, and continuing into Bangkok should be something they should be able to do. Looking at some map stats for them, we have the win-loss record, so the amount of maps that they've won versus the amount that they've lost. They have won 9 maps and they've lost only 2, and that was against Sentinels in the grand final, so they were undefeated in maps up until that point. So very impressive work there, especially considering that they did go down 2-1 against Sentinels and they were able to rally back. In terms of their best map, I debated whether or not to put best map for each team on the board because it is such a small sample size, but I figured that there is at least enough data there for me to at least talk about one map. There might be some disagreements with whatever map I put on as whatever team's best, but I'm just going off of the records. And for G2, their best record, at least in terms of more than one played, is Pearl. They are undefeated on this map with a 3-0 record. They have 72% win rate on attack and a 60% win rate on defense. 2 very elite numbers, makes a lot of sense since they had so much success. And looking at their overall attack and defense stats, they are very good at both ends of the map. On attack, at kickoff, they won 67 rounds, they lost 47, which is a 59% win rate. And on defense, very similar numbers. They won 63, they lost 44, another 59% win rate. So they're good on either side. There isn't a weakness that you can see that they're like worse on attack or they're worse at defending. They're very solid anywhere they go. And in terms of their MVP, it could be Leaf, but I decided to put Trent, who did have a better rating. He did have a rating, at least according to VR, of 1.26, which is in the top 5 of the Americas. In fact, that is tied for 2nd in the region. I'm really happy to see Trent in this spot. He looks like one of the best Taeho players in the world right now. We'll see if he takes his crown as the best Taeho player in the world by the end of this tournament. Definitely a lot of competition with Taeho players right now. It seems to be a pretty favorable agent in the meta, but I remember when Trent came onto the sea with that original guard roster and it looked like he was going to be the best player in the world, and then he just didn't reach that upper echelon, and now we finally see him in tier 1 last year. He has a good year on G2 in 2024, but isn't really reaching that like top 5 player in the world kind of vibe that people were expecting from him at the beginning of his career. And now finally, I think he's there. He's looking absolutely incredible for this team, one of the main reasons why they are here. So overall, G2 I think have a very good chance of winning this tournament. I do want to remind people that Americas always wins at least one tournament in every single year of the VCT, even dating back pre-franchising. North America, or the Americas region in general, wins at least one tournament, and it's usually the first one of the year. Last year it was Sentinels winning Madrid, the year before that EG won Champions, and in 2022 Optic won Reykjavik, and in 2021 Sentinels won Reykjavik as well, which was the very first international tournament that we ever had. So America's teams have a very good track record at winning the very first international of the year, and G2 looks very good. They absolutely look like either the favorites or at least close to the favorites overall. There are some very good teams here, but I think G2 have a very good chance to win this tournament. Moving on to the second Americas team that we have to talk about, we have Sentinels. Sentinels making sure that they start the year off strong. Definitely a bit of a bumpy kickoff for them overall, but I think they recovered very well later in the tournament. After that bumpy win against Loud and then losing against G2 in the upper final, they definitely cleaned up their game after that. And at the end of the tournament, they had 9 maps won to 8 lost, so they only won 1 more map than they lost. They didn't sweep any of the teams that they beat. The closest they got to that was against MIBR, but they did lose in that overtime match. But they still won against MIBR. They qualified for this tournament, and they're usually very dangerous internationally. In terms of their best map record-wise, we see a familiar face in Split. Started the tournament on that map pretty poorly against 100 Thieves, but they recovered very well in later matches. They overall have a 3-1 record on it. Attack win percentage was 56 and their defense win percentage was 57. Not overly elite numbers on that map, but pretty solid overall. In terms of their overall attack and defense, they won 100 rounds on attack, they lost 89, which is a 53% win rate, and on defense they won 88, they lost 85, that is a 51% win rate. So overall good numbers, but nothing too dangerous. These aren't elite numbers that we're seeing from them right now, but they can definitely get these numbers up. They have a very good team overall, and their MVP so far, in my opinion, has been John QT. He is leading the team in rating, which all the MVPs are. That's mostly how I decided them, but I also thought about it as well. But John QT for me was definitely their MVP overall, keeping them in some of those early matches very well. You could say Zekin, Zelsis at times as well, but John QT I think was just far and above the best player on that roster during kickoff. I don't think he's their best player overall. I would still give that to Zekin, but for the time being, John QT I think has been that MVP. He does have a rating of 1.09, which is in the top 10 of the Americas. So overall, Sentinels, as I said, are usually very dangerous internationally. Even though this new version of the Sentinels roster isn't looking like the world beaters that they once were, they still are the same organization that has been here before. They have a lot of experience on the roster, especially from last year. They have some new players in there that definitely have been taking their time to get acclimated, but I think once they really hit their stride, this team is going to be absolutely fine. I do not consider this team a favorite to win the tournament, but if they win the whole thing, that really would not be surprising. They have won the first tournament of the year 2 times in the past, including the most recent season. So do not count this team out, especially now that they're an underdog, and Sentinels doing an underdog story to win the whole thing, that would be one of the least surprising things that has ever happened in Valorant esports. Moving on to our next region, we have the Pacific, which has 2 teams that were not at Madrid last year. Definitely some change of the guard going on in the Pacific region right now. We have DRX and T1. Starting with DRX, they have been to international tournaments before, but 2024 was a bit rocky for them. They had some roster changes both throughout the year and before the year even started. Having a roster that had been together for a very long time, they finally made those changes instead of firing the coach, which a lot of people wanted. But now their coach Termi looks pretty justified in the changes that this team made in the offseason because they look absolutely dangerous. Finally winning their first regional title in the franchise VCT that was usually going to PaperX or a different team, but DRX finally get that done for them. It's a shame they couldn't do it with the old roster, Mako being the only person remaining from that Vision Strikers roster that was together for such a long time. So is this new version of this DRX team going to be able to finally bring home an international trophy for this team, something they also have not done? Well, let's look through it. In terms of maps, they won 9 maps, they lost 4. They made their way through the upper bracket and won in the grand final against T1. In terms of their best map, Fracture, they have a 3-0 record on. Attack win percentage is 63, defense is 54. In terms of overall attack and defense stats, on attack, they won 78, they lost 66, that is 54% win rate. In terms of defense, a little bit closer, they won 78, they lost 75, so they just got above a 50% win rate. It is 51 for them. So these aren't particularly elite numbers, especially coming from the top seed of the region. So that is one thing that I might look at this team and say that they might not be contenders overall. However, a lot of their players look absolutely fantastic, Hayumin being one of them, but Freen is definitely their MVP. Looking like the best Taeho potentially in the entire world. We'll see if he can do it at this tournament. He did have a rating of 1.16, so he's looking fantastic. This is technically his rookie year in the VCT, despite being around for a while, but he had to leave for military service. But he's looking absolutely fantastic for this team as a new addition. This looks like a really smart move from DRX. Overall, there are some things that concern me about DRX, not just with the stats that we just went through, but also considering their past. This is a team that has been able to make internationals, but seems to just always fall short, whether it be that old roster that they had for a very long time, or the roster they had in 2024 that did make it to champions, look decent overall, upsetting some teams that maybe people thought that they would lose to, but overall still falling short of that ultimate prize, that I'm not sure that this is the tournament that is going to be the one where they get it done. However, being the top seed out of the region, it is very impressive, and that should not be understated, so I wouldn't consider them to be the favorites of the entire tournament, but maybe a tier below. This team should be pretty dangerous at this tournament. If they get a top 3 appearance, I think they'd be happy, but overall, I don't know if that's going to happen. Their first match is against Sentinels, so we'll see how that one goes, but this team is definitely going to be one to watch in the entire Bangkok tournament. Moving on to the second seed in the Pacific region, we have T1, building a team in the offseason that a lot would consider to be a super team. However, However, their results in kickoff overall were pretty mixed. They did still qualify for this tournament, so at the end of the day, they got the job done, but there are a lot of concerning signs when it comes to this team, whether it be players talking in interviews afterwards, saying that the team cohesion is off or that there's problems here and there, or if it's some of their overall stats and performances being a bit underwhelming. Meteor especially is one of those players that people are looking at as, he's talking in interviews saying that there isn't, a lot of cohesion on the team, talking about issues that are pretty surprising to hear from a player publicly. But his stats overall at kickoff, while he definitely had his moments, Meteor is a very good fragger. He seems to be playing alone. His stats overall were not very good, especially when you compare it to some of the other players on the team. But again, the team kept winning and they ended up making it here, so can they turn things around? When you look at their maps, they won 12, they lost 9, so they won 3 more than they lost. In terms of their best map, it did end up being Lotus. They have a 3-0 record on that one with a 55% win rate on attack and a 67% win rate on defense. Pretty elite number on defense there, especially on Lotus, which typically is pretty attacker-sided. Looking at their overall attack and defense stats, on attack, they won 128, they lost 131, which is a win rate of 49%. The only team on this board that has an attack win percentage below 50%. So that is very concerning. They do not seem to be very good on that side of the map. And in terms of defense, it doesn't really get much better. They won 115 rounds on defense, they lost 109, which is over a 50% win rate, but only by a little bit, 51% for that. So that's definitely quite concerning. Their attack doesn't seem to have a lot of cohesion. Their defense seems to be pretty good overall, but if you're going to win tournaments, you have to be elite on both sides of the map. When you look at teams like G2, we'll look at some teams later as well in the EMEA region that have those kinds of numbers. You need to have both sides of the map be locked in and be very good, but they don't seem to have that. Right now, they don't seem to have that, so that definitely is a pretty big knock on this team. In terms of their MVP, Buzz makes an appearance here. He has a rating of 1.07. None of their players really in the elite range when it comes to rating, but they definitely have some pretty good shooters. And right now, that's kind of where this team is getting their wins from those individual performances, from those players that they got in the offseason that are meant to be just world-beater skilled players. But if they're going to be able to win a tournament, they need everyone to be playing well, they need everyone to be playing together, and that is something that is a pretty big concern for this team. But if they figure out that aspect of the game, then I think this team is going to be in great hands. I don't think this tournament is going to go great for them overall, if I'm being completely honest, but I still think that this team has a lot of potential and they just need to kind of figure out those chemistry issues, and if they do that, then they should be in good hands. But for now, I think they're probably in the bottom half in terms of power rankings, in terms of where you would rank who's the favorite and who's not, but maybe they fix everything and go on a crazy run. Would not be the most surprising thing. Moving on, we have the EMEA region, which has 2 pretty interesting teams here. One team that everybody expected to be here in Team Vitality, and one team that I don't think anyone expected to be here in Team Liquid. Let's start with Team Vitality, a team that built a really good looking roster in the offseason, and it has not seemed to be a collapse so far. They have looked very deadly in their own region, going undefeated, only dropping 3 maps. They won 9 maps, they lost 3, 2 of those being in the grand final. The first one was in their first match against Carmine Corp, and I don't think that the team that they are now would be the team that would lose a map against KC if they were to replay them right now. Those additions of Durka and Les seem to be very good decisions right now, and they kept most of the roster from last year, a roster that did do quite well. They didn't make it to a tournament until Champions. They had an up and down year overall, but they still have Safe, Kicks, and Trex from that roster. 3 very good players, 3 very experienced players. And now you have Safe on IGL, who's playing a bit of a flex role right now, sometimes playing Duelist, sometimes playing Initiator. And Durka looks like an absolute godsend for this team, but we'll get to him a little bit later. In terms of their best map, Abyss seems to be pretty impressive for them. They have a 2-0 record on it. Attack is 79% win percentage. Defense definitely leaving a bit to be desired, 44%, but it is a small sample size, only 2 times played on this map, so not a big deal. In terms of overall attack and defense stats, on attack, they won 82 rounds, they lost 47. That is a 63% win rate, which is top of the board in terms of attack win percentages. On defense, not as good, but still solid. They won 65 rounds, they lost 55. That is a 54% win rate. So their attack is very good, especially with a 63% win rate. That's very elite. But their defense, it's good, but not great. And that's something that they're going to want to clean up for this tournament, especially going against some of these teams that are going to have very good attack win rates. In terms of the MVP, the aforementioned Durka makes his appearance. He had a rating of 1.12, really making Fnatic look like absolute fools dropping this player. He is so good. He's been one of the most consistent players in Valorant for as long as he has played. Really don't understand that decision by Fnatic, but Vitality is reaping the benefits of it and making everyone look like a fool for downing him. I think overall Vitality are probably the favorites to win this tournament, or at least tied with G2. Really just depends on how you look at those two teams and how they're going to stack together if they face each other. But there's no reason why this team should not go on a deep run. There were concerns that this quote-unquote super team built in the offseason might collapse like other super teams have before, but that has not happened yet. The new additions look fantastic. Haven't talked about Les enough. He looks absolutely amazing. And Safe as an IGL seems to work, and this team is able to weather the storm when things go bad. They almost got swept by Team Vitality, and then they got the reverse sweep. So a lot of impressive stuff coming from this Team Vitality. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do at the international level. Can they take home EME's first trophy since 2023? We will see. Moving on to EME's other chance to win a tournament in what has been a quite long time, we have Team Liquid, a team that, as I said, I don't think anyone expected them to be here. I certainly did it. I thought that them getting to top 3 was impressive in and of itself, and then it was like, okay, you know, they got to top 3, they're getting some champs points, but now they're going up against Heretics. They're not going to win this match, right? Yeah, that ended up being a pretty bad prediction on my part, and Heretics are not attending this tournament, which is quite surprising to me. And Team Liquid being the team to knock them out, it's shocking, but they definitely look good. They looked pretty poor at the start of the tournament. They played Koi, they won that one, then they lost against Foot, and then they had a match against Apex where they lost one map. So a lot of things to be concerned and to think that this team would not make it to this international tournament, but then they just went on an insane run. In terms of maps, they won 15, which is the most out of any team, but that's only because they played the most matches possible. And they did lose 9, 3 of them being in that grand final that they almost won. In terms of the best map, Abyss makes an appearance. They have a 4-0 record on it. Very impressive there. Attack win percentage is 79. That's very elite for them. And defense is 58. So they're great at both ends of that map. In terms of overall attack and defense stats, on attack they won 138 at kickoff, they lost 101. That is a 53% win rate for them. On defense they won 132, they lost 122, which is a 52% win rate. So they're not particularly elite at either ends of the map, but they're good. And that's what a lot of their stats kind of come down to, is this team is good, not fantastic, but they were good enough to make it to this tournament. And that's mostly off the back of Kiko, who in EMEA looked like the best player in the whole region, which who saw that coming? Seriously, name me one person that said Kiko was going to be the best player in Europe, even over Durka in terms of overall stats, in terms of rating, in terms of just overall play. Yes, he lost to Durka, and I think Durka is a lot better. I don't think Kiko is the best player in Europe. I think his stats are completely unsustainable, but so far he's proven everyone a fool. There's no reason why he can't continue to do that. He did have a rating of 1.26, which is the top of the EMEA region. So overall, this team being here kind of has the same feeling as Carmine Corp coming into Madrid last year. Their team that had a really good start, looked much better than a lot of people expected them to, and then kind of fizzled out at that tournament, and then didn't have a good rest of the year. So Liquid is going to look to avoid to be that team. I don't think they're the favorites, but they absolutely are massive underdogs. I don't think they're playing a lot better than any of the other teams that are at this tournament, but again, they're here. Anything is possible. If this team is going to win, I think they're going to have to dig deep and embrace the underdog role. Team Liquid is a roster that is familiar with making international tournaments, so we'll see if they can repeat some of the success that they've had in the past, despite never winning one. I don't know if this is the tournament that they do end up winning one, but again, we have just been completely surprised by this team and could very well continue to be. Moving on to the last region we have to talk about, we have China. China coming into this tournament with the team that won the last international tournament that we had, EDG winning champions, and a team that did make it to champions and had a pretty impressive run despite falling off during the playoff stage, Trace. So starting with the EDG, the reigning champs winners, can they do a back-to-back tournament win? It's definitely possible, but this team doesn't exactly look like the world beaters that they did at Champs. They did get knocked down to the lower bracket of their tournament, courtesy of Trace. However, after getting pretty close to being knocked out of the entire tournament, they got their bearings set and they went on a pretty impressive run, and then make it into the grand finals and doing what they always do, win the Chinese region. In terms of overall maps, they won 12 maps, they lost 4. In terms of their best map, it is undoubtedly Haven with some of the most insane attack stats that I've ever seen. They have a 3-0 record on it. They have attack win percentage of 97%. I've been making videos for nearly 2 years, and I use a lot of stats in my videos, and I look at these sides of the maps and all this stuff. I have never once seen a 97% attack win rate for a map that is played more than once. They've only lost 1 round on attack on that map in the 3 times that they played it. 13-0ing 2 teams on this map during the kickoff tournament. Going to this map is just a death sentence for any team that goes against them. And their defense is very good as well with a 64% win rate, so they're just elite on this map. Don't take this team to Haven if you can help it. In terms of their overall attack and defense stats, on attack they won 108, they lost 67 at kickoff, which is a 62% win rate. In terms of defense, they won 84, they lost 74, which is a 53% win rate. They're tied for second overall in attack win rate, just 1 percentage point behind Vitality, so they're very dangerous on that side of the map, which makes a lot of sense considering the kind of players that they have. Chi-Chu, Nobody, Kane, who I did put as their MVP. Now, the Chinese region doesn't allow access, like the same access to the game client that VLR has that they do in the other regions. So I couldn't put rating down, so I had to go by ACS instead, and Kane did have an ACS of 270.4. And it makes a ton of sense for me to put him as the MVP of this team. They do have some incredible players overall. That's the main reason why their roster ended up winning champions, because they just have such a deep team. But Kane is still the best Chinese Valorant player. I don't think there should be a lot of argument for putting him as the MVP. Overall, coming into this tournament, EDG definitely have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They did almost bomb out of the regional tournament, but then they did what they always do and win the entire thing. So now, can they go back to back? I don't think they're looking strong enough to do it, but if they find their form, especially since these 2 Chinese teams have had more time to prep for this tournament than the other regions, their kickoff tournament ending a lot earlier than the other regions, which is kind of interesting. I don't know why Riot's doing that, but you know, Riot and their schedule can be pretty perplexing at times. So do not take this team lightly. I don't think any team that they're going to end up going up against is going to take them lightly. This team is still pretty scary, and if they end up going back to back, I would not be surprised, but I don't think that they're in the upper echelon that is going to end up winning. I do expect at least a top 4 from them, potentially a top 3. We will see what those top 4 teams end up being, but the Swiss stage should be a bit of a breeze for them. I am pretty confident in their chances. They do start their tournament against Team Liquid. I think that's pretty easy pick'ems for them, but Valorant Esports can be very crazy, can be very unpredictable, so we will see. Moving on to the last team we have to talk about, we have Trace Esports, a team that made a name for themselves at Champions 2024 by upsetting Leviathan, making it past the group stage, making it into the playoff stage, and then they lost both matches that they played, not even winning a map in those playoff stages. But this team definitely looks a lot better than the team they had at Champions. Making their way through the upper bracket of their kickoff tournament, they are the only team that went through the upper bracket to get to the grand final that did not win. Vitality, DRX, and G2 all made their way through the upper bracket and won their respective grand finals. So Trace getting a little bit embarrassed by EDG on the rematch, but no one's going to blame them too much for losing to EDG. EDG are China merchants, but this team definitely looks a lot more respectable than what we have seen from them in the past, and potentially could be a dark horse for this tournament. Maybe not to win, but maybe to get a top 4 appearance, something like that. Looking at their maps, they won 7 at kickoff, they lost 4, 3 of those being in the grand final, so they were doing quite well for themselves up until that match. In terms of their best map, they have a 3-0 record on Lotus. Attack win percentage was 70%, defense was 59%, so they're very good on attack on that map, and they're very solid on defense too. In terms of overall attack and defense stats, on attack they won 70 rounds, they lost 52. That is a 50 57% win rate. On defense, they won 59, they lost 52, which is a 52% win rate. And these numbers were definitely a lot higher in terms of the win rate before their match against EDG, which makes a lot of sense. But they still overall look really solid on either sides of the map, so that's definitely a strength for them, especially on attack. In terms of their MVP, again, had to go off of ACS for this one. Fane F ends up making his way. Hope I'm saying that right. Apologies if I'm not. His ACS was 225.7 at kickoff. As I said, this team is probably one of the dark horses at this tournament. There is only 8 teams, so a potential for a dark horse to win is definitely there. And this team clearly has improved from where they were at Champions, and they were able to upset some pretty good teams at that tournament. So we'll see what they can end up doing at their second appearance at an international tournament. I do not think they're the favorites. They're probably in the bottom half of the power rankings, but they can definitely prove that China is a deeper region than just EDG as the top dog and real contender and just having one other team that's okay but not great. They could definitely change that narrative. They have the roster, they have the ability. We'll see if they can do it. So that is all the teams that are attending the VCT Masters Bangkok tournament. As I said, this is looking like it's going to be an absolute banger tournament. There are some very, very talented teams here. Really excited to see how this tournament goes. It is at a pretty bad time of day for me being in Bangkok. I think the game started at 2 a.m. my time. So thanks, Riot. Appreciate that. But I'll try to watch as much as I can, and I will be reporting on it on this channel. I will try to do a power rankings of the teams that are attending, as well as a top 10 player list. It depends on how much time I'm going to have this week, but there will be more content about this tournament coming your way. This will be my focus on the channel for the next couple weeks. So thank you all very much for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of this tournament? Who do you think is the favorite? What teams are going to do well? What teams are going to do bad? Someone has to do bad, someone has to do good, and someone has to win the whole thing. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.